output of the matrix is pretty simple. There's only just 3 different connections here. Right now the default connections were made because we dragged this matrix below the subtractor here, and those default connections are note and gate CV, which are brought over into our subtractor as sequencer control. That's why this is running all those notes. Let's tab back around here and we'll bring in another instance of matrix, but this time we'll hold down Shift and drag it over. That way no default connections are made, and we can see that by tabbing around. There's no connections that are made here. So this time, instead of sending out these values as keys or notes, let's send them out as a curve, and I'll just paint in just a curve right here. We could also randomize this pattern if we like. So either way, we have this curve with a bunch of different values. What is that going to actually control? Hit Tab, and we can send out the curve CV here and bring it into any of these modulation inputs. So for example, I could make the connection here and drop it into filter 1 frequency of our subtractor. So if I turn that around, all of these values will be routed to control this guy here. Now we've kind of seen this before. When we've looked at the modulation envelope, we've given that a destination parameter, or the LFO here. We've basically seen this before where some sort of modulator has a target parameter that it modulates, but that's always been within a device. We've never really seen it before where one device modulates another. So let me tab that back around again. Check it out. All those curve values will go in here and sweep this frequency, and we'll be able to actually hear this if we run this and I play a note. Now we're actually not hearing anything right now because we're not connected to our subtractor. I need to select that down here, and now I'll be able to play it from my keyboard. Well, we're kind of hearing it, but it's probably better if we bring that all the way down and maybe give it a little bit of resonance. We're still not hearing a big change here, so I could tap this back around and we could ramp up the amount of influence that this guy has right here. What about if we randomize this pattern? Now listen to it. Very cool. Do you hear that filter opening and closing with each of these steps? So the matrix can either play out note values that any connected synth will play, or curve values that can be patched into any modulation input. Just about every instrument has inputs for CV and gate for notes, or modulation inputs for curve values. Let's have a look at them all. In an empty rack, I've brought over all of the instruments there, and if we tab this back around, go to the top of the rack, let me just hit L to hide these cables. Now the subtractor has gate and CV for sequencer control, and all of these modulation inputs. You know what? The same thing with Thor, all these modulation inputs, our Maelstrom, the 2 samplers here, even Redrum have these inputs. Basically, all of the devices, even some of the effects here, have inputs for CV or control voltage. You can use the matrix to step through differing values that in turn control other devices kind of behind the scenes through these connections. Too much to go through right now, but go ahead and experiment with the connections. You can have some real fun. I'll show you a couple more things before we move on to the RPG8. Now, I've already shown you how you can right click here and also do the same thing